Yeah, I always tell people, like, if you just people will say, I want to read. How do you read so much? Well, just break it down into basic math. I mean, if you spend 2 or 3 hours a night rotting, scrolling, watching something, say you took back a third of that. Instead of 3 hours watching TV, say you spend 2 hours watching TV and you spent one reading. So, it has this compound effect where if you read 1 hour a night, more likely than not, if you have 3 hours of free time and you decide I'm going to spend one reading, you're going to end up spending more than one reading.
Right.
Because you're going to get drawn into it.
This is The Modern Republic, a dialogue about the challenges facing our society today: education, culture, and politics. Plato began the conversation about justice, the great city, and the education of its citizens. This show continues that same conversation through a modern lens. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and join me on YouTube. For more from The Modern Republic, check out the Substack linked in the description. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. Now, on to the show. Today's guest is Mr. Josh Johnson, author of his self-named compendium and host of the podcast Compendium, a history collection. Known for his long-form explorations of history, Josh focuses on the stories that often slip through the cracks of standard education, giving listeners a clearer sense of how the past continues to shape the present. His commitment to reading widely and sharing what he learns has resonated strongly on social media, where he has gathered 100,000 plus followers on Instagram and 55,000 more on TikTok. Through that work, he has become an influential figure in the BookTok space, inspiring tens of thousands to pick up new books and deepen their curiosity. Please welcome Mr. Josh Johnson.
Yep. You do the routine and then you settle in for an evening of whatever it's going to be.
Yeah. Because this isn't your full-time gig, is it? You have a 9 to 5 outside of the
Yep.
Instagram and the TikTok?
Yep. I've got a 9 to 5, work for a furniture company. So very different.
You don't read a bunch of historical exposés there?
No. Funny enough, I do social media for a furniture company, but very different. Very, very different.
Okay. That kind of, I don't want to say it makes sense, but I've just gotten into the whole, for lack of a better, Instagram game, trying to make sure posts are all up. But, you've blown up here, and I don't know when you started posting, but I feel like I first saw you maybe at 2,500, and that wasn't that long ago. And now I just checked before, you got 110,000 now. So, I mean, when is the furniture company going to have to, say goodbye, because you're going to get all these brand deals because you're blowing up?
Yeah, well, the brand deals will need to be fairly consistent. It has been nice this year. There's been a little bit, but I think Instagram has grown very, very fast. So that is great, obviously, because there's the growth. But then on the other side of it, I don't know that brands necessarily know I exist to the extent that you would think that maybe somebody with 100,000+ followers, like you think that brands might know that they exist. Because the Instagram account had less than 100 followers until March of this year.
That's crazy.
But I'd had a following on TikTok. I started TikTok, I guess now like a year and a half ago. But the videos just got no traction on Instagram at all until March. And then one video got like 20,000 views, and then it just sort of opened up the floodgates. And then from then on, it was pretty much equal to TikTok. And then now it's like way more. So,
what was that video that got you the 20K?
It was one of the ones that worked. I think it was a repost of one of the earlier videos that did well on TikTok. It was probably like a Books for Dudes video or something like that.
Yep.
Those videos always perform really well. That was the first one that got things rolling on TikTok. I think I had 500 followers on TikTok maybe. And then I did a Books for Dudes video that got like 300,000 views, and then it was off to the races.
Was that your intention with putting the videos up? Like, hey, I just want dudes to be able to read because, I like reading, so other dudes should also like reading? Or what was the impetus behind that?
Yes, simply. I did, but I didn't know too. So there's layers to it in the sense that like, yes, I wanted to actually have something that I wanted to say, but I didn't know. I don't know. Like it happened so organically.
Sure.
You know, when I initially started TikTok because I was writing a book, and I figured whenever I got to the end of that manuscript, it probably would help if I had some sort of a online presence.
Right.
But I had no concept of, what that end goal would look like. Like, what is success in that situation? I have no idea. Had no idea. And I just figured, I should probably start posting on TikTok or Instagram or both. And so I did, and I finished that manuscript, read the book, and it was terrible.
Okay.
And and so and so I kept going with the social media stuff, and I did not publish that book. That book won't see the light of day, but the social media thing sort of took on a life of its own, and it probably wasn't until a few months ago, 5, 6 months ago. I mean, I had the history podcast, so there's that element of it. But, you know, I have been chewing on what am I going to be on social media? How am I going to show up? What are people going to know me for? People tend to know you for one or two things.
Yeah.
Uh, Best practices for having and I guess the term now is personal brand. Best practices for a personal brand is not just to do the one thing, but do a couple things that are recognizably similar, and show up and be consistent, and time will tell. And it just sort of, you take it as it comes, and you figure it out as it comes to you. So all of that to say, when I first started out and things were going fairly well, I didn't necessarily have a goal in mind, or a game plan, or anything like that. I just was making videos, and then ones that performed well, I doubled down on them, and I did that over and over and over again. And you look up and you go, "Oh, it happened overnight after a
Yep.
year and a half." So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's time on task, just sort of showing up consistently. And the thing that I did notice too was there were quite a lot of people a year and a half ago making videos that had bigger followings than I did, and I was looking up to them, and sliding into their DMs being like, "Hey, what can I do better? How can I uh make better content?" And grab the tips that they've got, and just sort of keep on keeping on. And you find that people will make videos for like 3 months, and then they're like, "Yeah, I'm working a lot and I'm not getting anything out of it." And so they quit. And I think a lot of people that ended up, I don't know what the term is, but developing an audience, they just sort of kept at it for longer than the people that didn't. And at the end of it, you look up and you go, "Oh, they've got an audience now," and it's probably just because they didn't quit.
Yeah. It's about persistence. A lot of it, right? That's good to
Yeah.
hear though that you said up until March you had less than 100 on Instagram and you
Yep.
just kept posting. That's great. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of a strategy, but and I had probably 15,000 followers on TikTok while I had no followers on Instagram. It's just that the audiences were not translating, and I was posting the same things, but they just didn't work on Instagram. And really, this was the case with TikTok when things first started getting going, and this was the case with Instagram. Is you just need one video to hit, and
Yeah.
things tend to just kind of fall in line after that. So you just sort of show up, you throw your dart at the wall, and then you carry on with your day. And the more darts you throw at the wall, the better you get at it. You sort of figure out, this is what's going to work. This is probably what's not going to work. And you just quit messing with the videos that aren't going to work. And after posting, I don't know, 100, 200, 300, 400 videos, you kind of know, okay, you have in your head a script before you even sit down to say anything, and things just kind of flow and go, and it tends to, I don't know, turn into what it turns into.
Yeah. I would say it's, I guess BookTok is the, like, talk as in TOC, like, is that part of TikTok, right? What is it about that content? Because I find it so funny. People just make videos like, hey, I'm reading these books. This is why you should read it, right? Why do you think people are drawn to that? Why don't you think people go to a library or to Barnes and Noble and just scour the shelves? What is it about watching other people tell you what books to read? What is it about that you think people are drawn to?
It's that simulated person-to-person experience when you go to a dinner party and this friend of a friend comes up and says, hey, do you read? And you say, yeah, I'm a fantasy reader. And they go, well, shoot, have you read this book? And then you say, no, is it any good? And they go, I just spent 3 hours reading this and I stayed up till 2 a.m. and I couldn't stop reading it. It's awesome. And then you go, well, I want to read that now. And it's that simulated, not like it doesn't happen in real life. It happens in a virtual world, but it's that same kind of a thing where, if you curate, I guess, your TikTok feed, more likely than not, the people that you are seeing consistently are those friend of a friend at the dinner party, and you trust their taste. You've, consumed enough of their videos to know if they come on and say this book is going to be terrible, I probably won't mess with it. If they come on and say that they've just read the best book that they've ever read, I need to read that ASAP. So I think it's this virtual thing where it just sort of fosters that communal aspect of reading, which is so important, but it does it in a way that's not actually in your real life. And I think a lot of people, everybody wants to read good books. Nobody wants to read bad books. And part of it is just, I would like to read. I don't really know what to read. Maybe I want to read a new genre. Maybe I want to pick up a book for the first time. Where do I start? If you go into Barnes and Noble, as the saying goes, if you want to eat an elephant, you go a bite at a time. Walking into Barnes and Noble, not knowing what you want to read or where you want to go is kind of like eating an elephant. And I think for some people, that BookTok experience is the bite at a time part of it.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. It's almost like you said, simulated, like a simulated community, right? Because a lot of books that I've read in the past year or two have been recommendations. I don't find them on my own. I rarely find books on my own. They're usually recommended to me.
Yeah.
But then even so, you're talking about like you're almost simulating this dinner party aspect, right? But sometimes not a lot of people show up to the dinner party, right? On TikTok. So then, maybe you're. I saw this morning. Maybe you posted something about Lonesome Dove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what if people aren't interested in Lonesome Dove? Are you now having to go read in different books so you can throw it on the Instagram, or how have your reading tendencies sort of changed now since? From maybe the outside looking in, your reading is, for the camera.
Yeah, I've got it's probably pinned on Instagram. It may or may not be on TikTok or vice versa. I'm not sure. But I do have a video where I talk about this friction, this audience friction, because people want you to talk about specific genres or specific types of things. And I don't really read specific genres or specific types of things all the time. Most people probably know me for history. Some people know me for fiction. There's, differing. And also once you get to a point where you have a large enough audience, like there's going to be people that come to you for this one thing that you did that may not be the thing that you do all the time. And they're just waiting for that next, that same thing again. So there's a natural audience friction in terms of what I read. I would say I'm a mood reader in that I just sort of pick up whatever I feel like reading and I read that. I haven't really let the social media aspect of things dictate what I read. I've been very, and this probably is just my personality. I just sort of read what I want and then I'll make a video about it. But at times that means that I'm reading things that I know will not make videos. Like I probably read 30 books this year for the podcast. And most, if not all of those 30 books were not books that were going to make a video, because they're just, I mean, it might be something published in 1890 about a very specific thing. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to go into the Library of Congress and download the PDF and then go, like, it's not going to be a good video, so I won't post about it. But, at the same time, I guess I figured out a way to supplement with other stuff. I can go back into the backlog and be like, okay, what did I read maybe this time last year? Or what are some video ideas to maybe circumvent the fact that I'm not reading things that are going to be videos right now, and supplement things that way. So all of that to say, I do read a little bit of everything, and I haven't really stuck myself in a box, which is probably both a good thing and a bad thing. A good thing in the sense that there's a fairly wide niched audience, if that makes sense. There's a wide net, but people do recognize me for probably one or two things. So that's a good thing, but there's also the friction of, like, if I'm going to post a video about history books, the fiction readers, the non-history readers, are naturally not going to be as drawn to that. And if I can maybe bridge the gap between the fantasy reader, the thriller reader, and the history reader, and cast that net a bit wider, then I try to do that where I can. But even still, I'll post stuff that's really, really nerdy. I'll post stuff that's very, very niche. And then I'll post stuff that's really popular. I might post about Red Rising. I might post about Hume. I don't know. There's going to be a little bit of everything in there. And I think to some extent, people have kind of just come to reckon with that as part of the whole experience.
I think it's good, though, that you said you're a mood reader, meaning I'm going to read this because I want to read this. So I don't know, because obviously I haven't spoken to all these creators, but I'm sure there's some individuals who do certain things for the clicks or the views, where it's good to hear, though, that this is actually you, though. Like, this is an organic Josh that we're getting to hear from. That's good. You said you read 30 books for the podcast this year. So
Yeah.
Am I understanding that you read other books besides the 30?
Yeah, I think I haven't tracked, okay, for the books for the podcast, it's like strictly research. I didn't
Sure.
necessarily read the entire books, so I'll pull sections as
Right.
as needed for different things. So I probably pulled sections out of 35 to 40 books for the podcast this year, and then I actually read and counted, I think, like 35 or 40 books this year. So I don't know. You could say I read 60. I don't even know if that's necessarily accurate, but I read parts of probably 70 to 75 books this year. Let's put it that way.
Wow, that's so then how many are you reading at one time? Do you have to start and finish one in one, not maybe sitting, but like, for me personally, I find it hard to start a book and then start another book because I can't, my wires get a little bit crossed.
Yeah.
So are you able to do that, or do you just, you're going to take 5 days, you're going to read, this book, and then I'll go read another book? Or are you able to do, 2, 3, maybe even 4 at a time?
Yeah, I graze. I have quite a lot kicking around at the same time, and I'll prioritize different books as I feel drawn to do so. But also I'll have usually a couple nonfiction books and a couple fiction books going at the same time. So, right now I'm reading a book about like 1840 to 1860 politics in America.
Okay.
And I've got Butcher's Crossing by John Williams, and what was the other one? It's a Harry Crews book, Scar Lover by Harry Crews, a Southern Gothic novel, and then I've got Meditations in there as well. So there's kind of a little bit of everything, and what that does is, obviously it's psychotic to have like 5 different books going at the same time, but at the moment, the priority read is Butcher's Crossing. But even that said, 2 days ago, I sat and read like 60 pages of the history book. So I don't know. I'll read a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It means that I'll go probably 2 weeks without actually finishing a book, but then at the end of the month, I might finish like 5. So it's irregular, but it works, I guess.
So then can I assume that you're not much of a TV watcher?
No, not really. No, I don't. I used to watch a lot of movies. In fact, on the shelf next to me, I have a bunch of them. I used to collect them and watch movies all the time, but I don't watch movies all that much anymore unless me and my wife hang out and we'll watch something, and we like to watch stand up.
Oh, sure.
So we'll watch sets on Netflix and things like that. And we usually will watch like, Great British Baking Show or something like that.
Okay,
But
sure.
honestly, if if I were to have a night where maybe she and the kiddo are out for a night, I probably wouldn't turn on the TV. I'd just sit down and read. Um, so yeah, no, we don't really watch a ton of movies, a ton of TV. It's we'll watch something to hang out, but other than that, no, we'll sit down and read.
So was that sort of like an expectation for you growing up? Like you were expected to read, or is this a habit that you formed later on?
No, this is all picked up probably it's post college. I did read a lot as a kid, but there was no expectation about how much I would read or anything like that. I naturally gravitated to books, and I was naturally fascinated by history, but there wasn't any sort of regularity to it until I graduated college, and I started writing in college, and so I think that probably fed into it a little bit. I started reading to, I don't know, I guess as you write, you want to read more and vice
Right.
versa. So there's probably an element of that to it, but also, I mean, honestly, I don't even know the I don't know if I could trace it to a specific thing or thought or intention, but I mean, I got married and there's this switch that I guess flipped when we got married where I mean, I used to play a lot of video games. I used to watch TV a lot more than I do now. And it kind of became this thing where I was like, well, I could spend my time doing this or I could spend my time doing that. One of them has a like a concrete cause and effect that will happen if I do it. And I should probably, you know, spend my time doing something that will actually give me something at the end of it that is tangible instead of something that I'm just sort of giving of myself to. And there's nothing at the end of it other than, you know, a abstract thing that doesn't really do much for my real life. So I don't know. I probably overthought it a little bit, but we just started reading and I love it. And it just kind of, I don't know, it snowballed.
That's great to hear, though, because I feel like a lot of people, Gen Z, young millennials, maybe even older people, they gravitate towards whatever screen they have
Yeah.
when, because I'll even look, my screen time.
Oh, my screen time is that. Don't hear what I'm not saying. My screen time is atrocious and it needs to get better. But there is a give and take of like, well, we don't watch a ton of TV, but I do scroll TikTok more than I probably should.
Fair. But I think even now, the average screen time in the country is maybe 6.5 or 7 hours.
Yeah.
And, imagine if we just cut that in half and
you'd get a lot done.
Read a book. You could get a ton done. I mean, I'm only on for about 2.5 hours a day. My job doesn't really let me get on my phone.
Yeah.
But even still, I think, if I cut that down to an hour total, who knows what I could accomplish? I could have had a Fortune 500 company by now.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, if you just people will say, I want to read. How do you read so much? Whatever. And it's not like I read a ton anyway, but you get that question. And it's like, well, just break it down into basic math. I mean, if you spend 2 or 3 hours a night rotting, scrolling, watching something, say you took back a third of that instead of 3 hours watching TV. Say you spend 2 hours watching TV and you spent 1 reading. Well, that 1 compounds over time. If you read, I think the math breaks out to if you read 1 hour every day, you are more likely than not going to read 35 to 50 books a year if you do that consistently. So, and the it has this compound effect where if you read 1 hour a night, more likely than not, if you have 3 hours of free time and you decide I'm going to spend one reading, you're going to end up spending more than one reading
Right. Yeah.
because you're going to get drawn into it. So it's tough at first to kind of exercise that muscle because it's atrophied because you don't ever use it. But
Right.
once that muscle gets going, you can sit down and read for 6 hours straight and it's no big deal. But people just don't do it. Once they do it, they're like, oh, wow, I can read so much more than I thought I could. And you just sort of need to do the exercise, I guess.
I've noticed that even if, I'll take a week off maybe because, I usually read before bed and early in the morning.
Yep.
If I don't do one of those things for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days, I get back to my book and it takes me longer. Like I literally have lost strength in my brain muscle to be able to read. So it's funny how that even works, over a week's time. I can only imagine if I didn't read for 6 months or a year, trying to pick up one of these super philosophical books that I haven't gotten to yet. Who knows? I'd be stuck. I'd be stuck trying to get there. Something that I struggle with. I say I struggle with it. There has to be like a specific thing that I'm going to get out of a book. So it's like, even if it's just to say that I've read it, right? So it's like, I got Capital by Karl Marx, right? I'm not a communist. I'm just going to read it, right? But it's like, I just want to say I read it, right? Or so I can understand the arguments against it or for it, whatever it is. But then I know a lot of people, I get into sort of little arguments with my wife about it all the time. The casual reader, they just want to read for fun. What are your thoughts on casual reading, right? I don't know if I've ever read something because it was fun. I may have enjoyed it as a byproduct, right? But I'm never like, golly, I can't. This is so fun reading this. So what are your thoughts on that? Like reading with no end in mind, like just for the sake of reading.
Yeah. So caveat or disclaimer, no matter, read what you want. You'll never hear from me, don't read whatever, fill in the blank thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That said, different books accomplish different goals. And that is not to say that if you read a, purely entertaining, maybe even you could say mindless book, that's not to say that you're not getting anything out of that it is a truly mindless activity, because it's not. It
Right.
is, reading the most mindless fiction is far better for your brain and emotional development than watching most TV shows or spending time scrolling on your phone. There's a cost benefit ratio that if you want to look at it in that sense, you're going to get more out of even, the worst fiction, because it activates a different part of your brain. But even that said, and that part of it aside, different types of reading, different people want different things out of their reading. And I would argue that everybody should read fiction, but I'm not even like a stickler for that. I know that's a thing. I've probably made videos before, not probably, I have made videos before urging men specifically to read more fiction because I think it is important. But I also understand getting really fascinated about a historical or philosophical subject and wanting to deep dive it, because I've done that quite a lot. And I understand. I mean, I've got Democracy in America that I was flipping through this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I could have been reading John Williams, but instead I was reading Democracy in America because I wanted to better understand, political theory in the 1800s. So I get it. Everybody wants different things, and it's totally fine. There's not any like bad way to read, but I think they're the most optimized, if you want to look at it in that verbiage, most optimized way of reading is reading a little bit of everything, reading some philosophy, reading some history, reading some fiction, reading for fun, because I think reading should be fun. Read something maybe that's just a thriller on the New York Times list and have a blast for a few hours on a Saturday afternoon, and then go pick up something with a little bit more meat on its bones. But the thing that I would argue is not a bad thing, but maybe not getting the most out of the practice is somebody who decides they're going to read one thing and only ever reads that one thing. A fantasy reader who never breaks out of the fantasy genre, a romance reader who never breaks out of the romance genre. I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice if you don't go pick up an old Western, or if you don't go pick up a book on philosophy, or if you don't go pick up a book on maybe a political theory or something like that. But, you know, I guess the really drummed down version is don't just read one thing. You can get a lot out of fiction if you're a primarily nonfiction reader. You can get a lot out of nonfiction if you're primarily a fiction reader. And I think reading broadly and sort of dipping your toes into a lot of different pools will round you out as a person in a lot of different beneficial ways. So there's not necessarily a concrete, if you do this, you'll get this. But at the end of it, I think you would find that your emotional intelligence has increased if you read a little bit of this, that, and the other. And also your actual IQ, your intelligence will have increased as well.
As you're reading, how do you get the most out of that book? Whether it be your fiction, like you talked about, or even a history, a philosophical thing. Are you personally taking notes, annotating your page? How do you get the most out of what you read? What is your like active reading style?
Depends on the book. Some books require me to be a little bit more intent about my reading, and other books don't. But let's say I'm reading a book that I do actually want to get the most out of, and there's a lot of meat on that bone. I tend to, my annotation style is kind of schizophrenic, and it should be more regimented, but it's just not. And I don't know why that is, but it's just not. Right now, what I'm doing is, especially for history stuff that I want to remember and take notes on, I'll take pictures of pages that I find interesting, and then I can copy and paste the excerpts that I want and put them in a Google Doc. And I organize Google Docs by subject. And I typically will gather a bunch of excerpts, passages, quotes, and put it into this Google Doc or Word document so that I've got it digitally. But I tend not to mark up a ton or write a bunch of notes in the margins. I do have a lot of sticky notes in books, but I found that I wasn't always remembering what I was sticky noting, because I wouldn't also highlight the specific passage. So I'd open up the page and I'd see the sticky note, and I was like, okay,
Sure.
there's something here, but I don't remember exactly what it was, and so it would take me a second. So I found that if I take a picture of the page and then I can go back and copy and paste things, and I tend to do a little bit better remembering what I was trying to get out of it, doing it that way. And I like having a digital version of what I save because I can always come back to it really, really easily wherever I am. So it's not a second brain, but if I want, an excerpt on, for example, there's this guy, William Yancey, that he was a political agitator, a pro-Confederate before the Civil War, and terrible politician, but it was a great orator. And he had this theory about politics that essentially went, the best way to do partisan politics in his day, in the 1850s, was to point out things that were wrongs or slights to his base, whoever he was speaking to, his constituency. He would say, look at this terrible thing that they did to you. They hate you. And it would, pull up all of this awful feeling in his base about the other side, whatever the other side was, in his case, Republicans. And then he would then turn that rage of his base against his opponent. And I found that to be incredibly, it sounded very similar to American politics in 2025, but it was from like 1860.
Yep.
And it came out of a Confederate's mouth. So that was a very interesting moment, because it's like, well, okay, we'll take it where we can get it, but it's something like that I want to remember the quote and come back to it, because I think there's a lot of tread on that tire. Um, Things like that, I like having in a Google Doc where I know where it is. I can go back to it. Um, and not just that, there's going to be a lot more there too, and some more context and some, historian notes and things like that. So I like doing it that way. But I know there's some people that annotate way better, have, regimented systems, and it's all color coded, and they can open up a book from 6 years ago and they know exactly what they were doing. And I'm not there yet, but maybe I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I don't know if, that would be interesting to see if somebody had a system good like that, because I just take a highlighter and I see
Yeah.
a cool sentence and I'm like, that looks great. Or
Yeah.
I'll do the same thing. I have a bunch of book tabs and I'll just put it on a page. And
Yep.
then I open the page and I was like, why did I tab this for? I don't understand
It's
why.
the same thing. I really want to get better about having a frictionless system. Some people do Notion templates. They just like see
Oh,
a
sure.
quote,
Yeah.
they'll just put it in there, and then they've got it forever. And that sounds great. Um, Even still, I don't know. There's something about it that just doesn't quite click as like, okay, that's perfect. I'm still searching for the perfect way to annotate that sort of keeps things evergreen, and I've got it forever. Maybe journaling. I've seen some people that say that if you journal, that's going to be your best way to dig a layer deeper than the one you're reading, and just sort of wrestle with it a little bit in your own thoughts. Maybe that's the best way to go about it, but I haven't really done a ton of that yet.
I think that probably is the answer, the journal right there. But there's even friction there, right? Because I've tried it, um, with just like morning reading or whatever. But then you have to stop the reading and then go to the writing, and then you come back and there's like this sort of back and forth. And maybe you could get into the flow of the back and forth, but sometimes I get into a flow and I can just start cranking out the book, but then I got to stop. I got to write down. I got to do the thing, and it's good. It's great for my brain. But I wonder if there's not going to be fiction, or friction. Excuse me. No matter what you try, especially
Yeah,
if you're trying to
probably.
get the most out of a book.
Right. I found too, the thing that forces me to get more out of a book is when I have to write about it.
Yeah.
So if I'm writing about an idea, obviously I've got to do a little bit of research in order to support the idea. If I'm going to write about fiction, typically I'll do a little bit of research on the author or the context around the novel, but then also you want to annotate the novel itself so that you've got something to present to a wider group of people about the thing. So that has almost been a cheat code in the sense that it deepens my understanding of what I'm reading far more than just reading it, but also it couples as it's something to share with other people. And I probably wouldn't have started doing that had I not had the thought, hey, I should probably write something or start a newsletter or whatever. But now that I've done it, it's almost invaluable for the books that I have sat down and done that process for, because I've gotten so much more out of the reading doing it that way.
Yeah, I would agree. I think reading and writing, not only do they obviously complement each other, right? But they're almost a requirement for each other. Because if you just read all the time, it's like, what are you doing with all this stuff? And then you write for so long, well, you run out of things to write sometimes. Now, I'm sure there's some unicorn who can just write as long as they'd like, but that's what's great about it, because you read so much and then you can have something to write about.
Yeah, I
which
know.
is what I encourage a lot of people to do.
Yeah, there's a guy I know who's one of the smartest people that I know, and he's a reader. He's got one of the best personal libraries I've ever seen. And I remember I asked him years ago, because I was telling him like I wanted to write, and I remember asking him, "Are you going to write anything?" Because he's reading so much, and it's not just like commercial fiction. He's reading lit fic, and he's reading Gaddis, and he's reading David Foster Wallace, and some of these more heavy hitters in the literary fiction space, and he's read them all. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm just a reader. I'm not a writer." And I remember that struck me as kind of odd, because I guess in some sense there is a natural inclination to write, and maybe not everybody has that. But at the same time, I don't know how you can read all of that and then not have an overflow of writing that would come out of you.
or even just something to say.
Right. And for him, I think he's got a YouTube channel, so he talks about the books, and there is an overflow in that sense, but there's not an overflow in terms of prose. And he might be writing behind the scenes, and I just don't know about it. But there's not his outlet, I guess. The overflow for him manifests itself differently than it probably would for me, even though we both make videos on the internet about books. So
Sure.
it might appear that there's the exact same outlet, but I guess always had the propensity to want to write. And he was like, yeah, I'm just not a writer. And maybe that's, maybe that's the case for a lot of people. And that's just not my experience.
Yeah, I guess it's, whatever floats your boat. I just know that once I actually started reading, like seriously, not just like what I had to do for school, like I actually took interest in what I was reading. I had to get it out somehow, and I figured the best way was typing it up. I initially started literally writing because I had like a notebook. I would write essays. So hard to correct your errors on there, so I just took up the Google Docs.
Yeah.
What would you say then is the cost to the average individual of not reading? What is it that they're losing? Like what is it that they're actually missing out on? Because if it's pure knowledge, you have a great history podcast. They just need to listen to that. Or there's tens of thousands, maybe millions now of YouTube videos on any subject we want. Like we said, entertainment's a gas. So what is it about reading? What are we losing by not reading?
Well, you're losing several different things. If we're going to go down the history avenue, I think I put out something on Substack the other day that was like, if you just get your history from podcasts or documentaries or YouTube or whatever, you're missing like 3/4. It's the iceberg. You're just seeing the iceberg that poked up out of the water, and you're missing everything below it that makes it so much more impactful and also impacts everything around it. History specifically is something that the more you learn about it, the more it sort of weaves together into this weird tapestry mosaic thing. And you start to understand kind of how the world works a little bit better. You also understand human nature a little bit better. But oftentimes, and actually not oftentimes, all the time, history is far more complicated than it was ever presented to you in a documentary or podcast. As much as they tried to add nuance to it, there's even more nuance that just didn't make the cut. So if you're not reading and sort of going back behind and doing some research for yourself, you're missing out on nuance, and you come away with a very black and white version of the world around you that does not exist, but that's what you think exists. And it's a lie. So, for example, if your only experience with the American Revolution is the Ken Burns documentary, you're getting a two-dimensional version of what the American Revolution was, even though it's a really in-depth and dense documentary. It's, what is it, like 8 hours long or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
That's a lot of information. But even still, you're missing out on a ton of context. You're also getting the Burns version of the American Revolution, which, spoiler alert, is different than a lot of historians' versions of the American Revolution. So you're doing yourself a disservice because you're not actually learning history in its fuller scope. You're never going to learn everything. But if you study something, you're going to get a lot more out of it by reading the books yourself and using, maybe this book as a jumping off point to that book, and then that book as a jumping off point to another book. You get a much fuller picture. You pick up a lot of stuff that other people won't know. And you're going to also, this is probably the most important thing, you're going to develop your own understanding, your own version of the events through what you've read, which is invaluable to you because your interpretation of the world around you is only your own, and it can't be shaped by other people. And I find that when I read, I build with like little Lego blocks. I build my own interpretation of past events through how it's been interpreted to me through his historiography. If you just read one book, that's the only version that you've got. If you read two books, you have a grayer version. If you read 3 books, it's even grayer. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you read 20 or 30 books about something, you probably know that subject fairly well, and you know it with some nuance. That's the history part of it. Fiction, what you're missing out on is you're missing out on emotional resonance that you're not going to get in nonfiction. The thing that fiction does best and only fiction can do is it holds up a mirror to yourself. And in that mirror, you see yourself for who you really are, because somehow fiction is able to explore different emotional states and methods of being and, different brain forests. It's able to explore those in a way that you can somehow experience that vitally through the book you're reading. And by doing that, you are exploring lived experiences that are not your own. And that's invaluable if you want to sort of expand your horizons and maybe get outside of your own lived experience and get connected with, the broader humanity around you. So there's an emotional a resonance, I guess, or experience that you're not going to get if you don't read fiction. You're also probably going to miss out on some enjoyment because fiction can be really, really fun. And it, I think, can do things that even the best movies can't do. It can take you on some wild rides, and it can be an absolute blast, and it can you can be transfixed to the activity. But I think the main thing is that there's sort of this voodoo magic that happens when you're really sucked into a book that you're not going to get that experience anywhere else. Equally, if you're writing fiction, there's an experience that happens that's unexplainable, and you cannot get that experience doing any other activity. And it's really tough to mirror that trying to find it in other places. So, there's going to be, I guess, like I said before, there's going to be different things you'll get out of different types of readings. Some of it is going to be more edifying than others, but I think in most senses, you're probably going to be missing out on something or another if you don't read it all.
So there are some books that do these things better than others, right?
Yeah.
We have your books that have stood the test of time, your classics, if you will, your Brothers Karamazov, The Odyssey. What is your view on the classics? I know my feed personally on Instagram is just all classics, and that's, personally what I'm into. But in your view, are they worthy of being the classics? Like, are they really these greatest books of all time? Or are they are really good books? Or do you think they get too much airspace?
I don't know. I'm probably not the best person to ask because I was a genre reader for a really long time, and I didn't pick up classics or literary work probably until the last year or so. So I haven't read all the classics. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I do think that there's in the literary books that I have picked up, they tend to be trying to do something very different than genre books are trying to do. And I think that's really important because when you're trying to judge whether or not a book is good, it's very difficult. I mean, there's basic objective things that you can say, okay, they don't know how to write sentences. That's not good.
Right.
They don't understand how humans work. That's not good. But other than some really basic and obvious things that everybody can pick up on, it's tough to know whether or not what an author has created is good objectively. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And so you have to go back to what were they trying to do, and did they accomplish what they were trying to do? Sometimes it's really difficult to know what they were trying to do. But if you can kind of tail along with the journey that they were trying to take you on, and if you can sort of experience that secondhand and try and get in that brain space and try and understand the context around what it was they were writing and why they felt it was important to write it, you might get something really important out of it. So all of that to say, I don't know. I mean, they're probably overblown a little bit because people shout, Cormac McCarthy is great. He also doesn't use punctuation where he doesn't want to, which is super annoying, but like, I don't know. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know, but I think classics are great. They're classics for a reason. I think in a lot of places they are trying to do some incredibly difficult things, and also sometimes they just get caught up in the zeitgeist. Moby Dick and Brothers Karamazov are just sort of representative of their place in time and of their hemisphere. Moby Dick is one of your quintessential Western Hemisphere works of fiction, and Brothers Karamazov is the same for the Russian sphere of influence. So there's different points of view and there's different worldviews, and they're going to, they're just going to exist in the world very, very differently. And the way that they view story and humanity and, the meaning of existential questions like the meaning of life, they're going to approach those very, very differently. So I don't know. Are classics overblown? Maybe, but also probably not.
Maybe, but probably not. I always think, because the Odyssey, I brought it up. It's been around for a couple thousand years now. If it got released today, like we had no prior knowledge, would it still be as good? Or is it only good because it's also been around for 2,500 plus years? I don't know. That's what I think. Now, I still think it's a good book. I'm not going to say that it's not, but
yeah, I mean, there's
fun to think about.
There's certain works are foundational, I think, on our understanding of how the world works, and that's one of them. If it were to get re-released today in modern language, we wouldn't know what to do with it because it doesn't fit our modern taste in story or in form or any of those things. But our modern taste is derivative of the Odyssey in some way, in like a great, 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 great grandfather kind of a way.
Sure.
So, it's like what people say about Lord of the Rings. Does Lord of the Rings hold up nearly 100 years after it was released the first time?
Yes, it does.
It does. But in some ways it doesn't, because song breaks do not get published in 2025. But overall, I mean, it holds up because it's brilliant. It's
right.
It's a lightning in the bottle kind of a story, but also a genre was built up around the foundations of what made Lord of the Rings work. So, Lord of the Rings created fantasy fiction, and fantasy fiction can only exist because Lord of the Rings once existed.
Right.
But even still, there are things in Lord of the Rings that a modern reader is going to read and be like, what is going on?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Because it doesn't fit. But that doesn't mean that it is any less important than when it initially came out.
Yeah, that's a good point. What are some of your personal favorite books?
Well, The Hobbit, since we're on the subject, I think it's great. Hot take, The Hobbit's better than The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
It's a tighter story. It just works narratively better. It is the Lord of the Rings story in 300 pages, which, if you have any gripes with the trilogy, or if you want to call it a trilogy, it is that narratively, it is not quite as tight as what he did later on with The Hobbit. So I think The Hobbit's brilliant. I just read a book, White Noise by Don DeLillo, like a month ago, and it blew my mind a little bit. It was incredible. And structurally, the more I think about it, the more I think that structurally it was brilliant. But when I was reading it, plot, it just sort of is, there kind of is a plot, but I don't know. The thing that made it work for me was that each sentence I felt like was 10,000 hours of work. It just felt perfect. Everything, it was sublime. And that is a very, very difficult reading experience to have more than once. It was great. Lonesome Dove's probably another one. I read that earlier this year as well, and it was it was an experience. I've talked about that one quite a bit. Um, I really loved Shogun by James
Okay.
Clavell.
Mm-hmm.
I am annoyed by it, but it is awesome at the same time. I
Okay.
think Shogun at its best is some of the best fiction that's been written by an American writer since it was written. It does have it has quirks. It's an Americanized version of Japan.
Right.
Um, they have these, it's like an obsession with honor and personal suicide that's just stupid. And they have these dialogue tags, these Japanese dialogue tags that are so annoying. But those things aside, if you can get over those things, it's great because the story is awesome. But it does have some things in it. It's just like, dude, come on. And I guess you can chalk that up to it was 1980 or whatever it was when he published it. Or maybe you can just chalk it up to he's a racist, which may be fair. I don't know. But I think that book is awesome. What else? I'm not a great best books of all time kind of a guy because, well, honestly, I haven't read all of the books that you would find on a best books list or
Sure.
the most essential reading lists. I haven't read, but maybe like 15% of those books on any given list. The Road was incredible. No Country for Old Men was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to read All the Pretty Horses in 2026
Okay.
and do that. Is it the Border trilogy? Maybe is what that's called. I can't remember. And then I want to read a bit more Southern Gothic fiction and some Steinbeck. So I read Of Mice and Men and it was awesome, and I want to read East of Eden. And I think if you were to ask me after I finish East of Eden, that one would probably be on this list.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'd say also Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson is one of the best examples of what fantasy can be. And that series is awesome as well.
What do you mean when you say Southern Gothic?
Harry Crews comes to mind, Flannery O'Connor a little bit.
Okay.
Southern Gothic's really, I've seen it come up in reviews, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the term because I'm not 100% sure. I think it's, I think one of the best example, or what I read in an article, one of the best examples was The Gospel Singer by Harry Crews, which I guess is meant to be this sort of spiritual reckoning, physically represented in a Southern setting.
Southern is in the American South?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I think Walker Percy is one of the examples of this, and I'm sure there's others. But yeah, the idea of not quite horror, but approaching it through the lens of the American South, and usually it'll deal with sort of down and out characters or poor characters. Oftentimes it'll deal with the mid-century 1900s. So you have, maybe it's Dust Bowl, maybe it's, Great Depression, maybe it's post-World War II or something like that. But it's sort of that era that, I don't know, it ends up being in Georgia or Mississippi or Alabama or something, and it's depressing usually.
Okay. Okay, interesting. If there were 3 books that you had to recommend that somebody read at some point in their life, what would those 3 books be?
Yeah, Lonesome Dove's certainly one. It's one of those lightning in a bottle books that most people bounce off of it because it doesn't go anywhere for 250 to 300 pages. But if you stick with it, I think it's incredibly rewarding. I think there's a lot to choose. Some people say that they just can't stand it for 200 pages. And I'm like, you're missing a lot because there's a lot there that's great for 200 pages, but also I really loved it. And, not everybody has my reading taste, so that's fine. I always recommend Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch because
Okay.
it's such a blast of a book. It's a heist story in a sort of a fantasy Venice setting, kind of a Renaissance-ish era setting. It's just fun. It's comfort food for me. The writing is, well, I mean, it's a character book. It's part of the series called The Gentleman Bastards, and it's just they steal stuff from people, and they go to great extravagant lengths to steal stuff from people, and it's colorful and witty, and it's got a rude energy to it. It's really fun. Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett is another one that was just kind of a saga story of building a cathedral, but it's not really about building a cathedral. It's about all the people that contribute to building the cathedral. It's got a great antagonist because he is just pure evil, and it probably turns a lot of people off because he is so pure evil, and he's just, I mean, if you want a quintessential bad guy, I mean, he is it. But because he's so bad, all the good guys are, by contrast, really easy to pull for. So it's just such a fun book that I probably will reread every 5 years or so. That's a really easy one to recommend. So yeah.
Before I let you go, could you talk a little bit more about your podcast? What is it that you're talking about on there? I know I saw you just interviewed. Was it Barry Strauss?
Yeah.
Pretty famous historian. Excuse me. So yeah, what is the podcast like? How's it been going? How long you been doing that?
I've been doing that for probably a little over a year. I started it because I was waiting a really long time for Dan Carlin to release his next hardcore history episode, and I wanted that same kind of a thing, but I didn't want to wait for him to do it. So I figured, how hard could it be? He just sits there and talks for 6 hours about something. I can sit there and talk for 6 hours about something, and famous last words. So it's a long form history podcast in that kind of a Dan Carlin sort of a style. I'm trying to figure out the best way to kind of keep it going with that style because I read like 40 books on one subject for it this year, and it was a lot. So I don't know how sustainable it is to keep doing 3.5, 4 hour episodes about one thing every 2 or 3 months. But I've got a series on the First and Second Indochina Wars, aka the French War in Vietnam before the Americans got there, and then the Vietnam War. I've got a show about 1066, which people still listen to and like, so that's great. That was the first one I did. And then I'm working on a long form series on the Civil War at the moment. So in between all of that, we talk to historians and do some experimental things here and there. I did one on Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia that was kind of this experimental show style that was a little bit shorter, a little bit more nerdy. It was about supply, and it was about how he basically conquered Persia, but we didn't really talk about the battles a ton. It was all the other stuff that he did. So it's fun. It's trying to make 3D versions of the stuff that you learned in school, but you most certainly learned 2-dimensional versions of these stories in school. And these are my attempts to sort of make them come to life for you. We talk about a lot of books because I read a lot of books for them. And I think best case scenario, if you listen to any one of the series and you come away knowing a little bit more about it, best case scenario is you learn a little bit, and then you keep hearing these same books come up as I quote them, and you go, I want to go read that book. And then you go read the book, and then it sort of snowballs from there. And then you actually learn for yourself about the subject.
Can the listener find it on Apple, Spotify? Where is it?
Yeah, everywhere podcasts can be gotten. It's Compendium, a history collection.
And then you write on Substack as well. What does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, right on Substack as well. We got a little book club over there. We're reading Train Dreams here by another book that's just incredible, by the way. And it's got a movie on Netflix that just came out,
wow.
which is also a fantastic movie. Yeah, we've got a book club over there, and then I'll write history occasionally on there, but it's more so commentaries on books. I'm planning on releasing some more writing samples occasionally on there in the future as well. It sort of leans more into the book recommendations side of the house, and then the podcast is more so into the history side of the house.
So you have a Substack, you have a podcast that you read 40 books a year for. You
Yeah.
post quite a bit on Instagram and TikTok. You have a 9 to 5, and you have a small child.
Yes. Yeah, we stay busy over here. This is now you understand. We don't have time to watch TV shows around here.
I guess you have more hours in the week than everybody else because you can get so much done.
Well, I do have to get up pretty early. That's probably the trade-off is I'm up at 4 every day. But I love to do it. So it's fun.
That's awesome. Josh, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.